a shout out if any farmers would like to champion their product and do a farm to table with us directly, then I'm very, very excited and open to that. That's been a lot of fun in the past, meeting the guys that work, similar sorts of hours to myself on farms to, really bring produce that they believe in. And, those are the same ones that are going to stand up in front of 100 people and say, this is what we produce and this is why we believe in it and this is why we do it. Then they're the absolute rock stars of my world.
There is rarely a life untouched by hardship or challenge. On this podcast, we invite our guests to share their very personal stories. We harness the wisdom and resilience of our guests, which has shaped who they are today.
Carl Rogers said, "That which is most personal is in fact most universal." Together we'll be inspired to embrace the resilience in our own stories and to gain strength in the face of adversity and have a few laughs along the way.
Hi, I'm Donna.
And I'm Di. We are the Double Ds and welcome to the Discovery Diaries.
We acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which we are recording this podcast. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and acknowledge their spiritual connection to family and storytelling.
Both Donna and Di were born here on these lands. We are grateful to draw on the culture of telling and sharing stories, and we hope that you will draw inspiration from the stories that are shared here.
Di, we don't have a formal warning on this episode like we have on some of our other episodes, but I would like to do an informal warning. If you're listening to this episode, do not listen when you are hungry because you are definitely going to feel like eating once you listen to this episode. And also, ideally, have a suitcase ready to go and or a passport because you're going to be willing and ready for a fun adventure after listening to this episode as well.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Donna, because we've actually got Simon Naber from More and More Café, a bit of an institution down in the West End of Fremantle. For those of you who've been there before, you would have experienced some of their award-winning food, and they're also a fantastic venue for weddings and other such things. But Simon, who's our guest and you'll be listening to, is a chef, a health enthusiast, and that really shines through in this episode, and also a business owner, obviously. He has been running More and More as a venue and a cafe serving superb, high-quality ingredients for over 17 years. They can be found on Instagram under More and More Cafe, but if you have been there, you probably will have been served up some really natural whole foods that are good for you and good for the environment.
Simon, it's fantastic to meet you. I have been to your cafe More and More dozens and dozens of times, having worked in Fremantle for 25 years. I think your cafe opened in 2008.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, and it's an institution, and it's fantastic to meet you.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. And for our listeners, we met about 6 months or so ago, Simon, at fairly random place called a non-violent communication group. Yeah. It's something that I go to as regularly as I can. I get a lot from it. And when we got speaking, I just thought you had a really interesting story, and I'm sure I didn't know half of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to dwell on that, it's not that either of us are particularly violent people.
Indeed.
People, sometimes never heard of nonviolent communication, or NVC for short. But geez, it's a wonderful, wonderful study of just how to communicate in such a way without blaming words. And, it's a wonderful thing if you can get your head around it. And yeah, it was a real pleasure having that chat that day. So, like I said to you, I went across to the Palmyra version instead of the South Fremantle one just because I thought you'd be there. But, it's a great thing. I really enjoy working with Tanya and, love that sort of work.
Yeah, me too. And I think, we could probably do another whole podcast just on that maybe one day because it's such a great tool and it's been so effective for me personally. So, Simon, there's lots of places we could probably start because I know you've had quite a portfolio career, we might say.
Cool.
But where would you like to start?
I guess I was thinking about this on my drive up. I really think that, 25 years as a chef, my, overcoming diversity, let's jump into sort of where we're at. The first one that I remember really as a chef beginning was most of the chefs were all competing to get into a hot section, to be surrounded by these big flames and to put out the most amount of meals and everything. Whereas to me, what's always been exciting and interesting is seeing what effect food and the combination of foods has on my body and the body of the people that I'm feeding, because it's one thing to kind of serve people a big nourishing meal that puts them to sleep, but if you're working in the middle of the day and you want to give them nourishment that's going to carry them through the day, wake them up and see them have a fantastic day, that's much more what lights me up than I've certainly done some crazy hours in some really busy restaurants. I've done the top end in London. I've worked in France. I've done a lot of things that I guess I wanted to put on my resume, but for the main part, it's really come back to, in the end, for me, it's what's freshest, what's local, what's nutrient dense, and what's going to leave me feeling a real sense of satisfaction around what it is that we can present and, champion, if you like.
So you've obviously done a lot, and you started when in chefing, and where did you start with chefing? How did that come about? Were you like straight from school? Had you done a chef's degree, or where did it all start?
We'll take a long story and make it really short. I finished school. Certainly not at the top of my class or anything, but I did manage to get through school, and as soon as I left, there was an opportunity to move to Albany and study fine woodcraft. It was the one subject that my teacher looked at me and said, "How did you make your project?" And I'm like, "Well, you're the teacher, you tell me." So I had a real affiliation with that, just that sheer joy of creation. So I just remember sitting on a wood lathe and watching this beautiful form come out at the end of a chisel, and just still to this day I get the hairs standing on the back of my neck, because I just really enjoy watching that unfolding of a brand new creation. And I guess I get that every time in the kitchen. It might end up in the toilet bowl in 12 hours, but it looks fantastic when it leaves the kitchen. And that's also, that's part of the joy, as sure as we're born, we're all going to exit as well, So the creations are the same. It's no problem.
So you were how old, sort of like 17, 18 at this stage, were you?
17, I was studying fine woodcraft full-time at Albany TAFE, and I was washing dishes 2 years later, and I'd done 2 years of fine woodcraft. They took on a world-class chef who came back to Albany only to take over the Esplanade Hotel again, Johannes Knierim, someone I have a lot of respect for. And thank you for not firing me as many times as you might want to.
Johannes, if you're listening.
Yeah. He's a great man, he really is. I was there for 2 years, but he'd been around the world cooking and done a lot of the things that I really admired. And he said to me straight up, he said, "Look, if you want to travel, don't stay in a spaghetti restaurant in Albany. Like, you've got to go straight from here to a 5-star. And he really encouraged and helped me to do that, even though by the time I left, they literally rebuilt the kitchen so that 2 people could do the job that I was doing when I left, which, was a bit of a credit. And even though I didn't get along with the guy who owned the place at all, he sat me down, bought me a bunch of drinks, which was unusual because he was very, very tight, and asked me to come back. And I just thought, wow, it's incredible that you were so nasty to me, but now you want me back because you realise what you had. But anyway, so that was about 19. I left there, went to a 5-star hotel. I did year and a half in a 5-star hotel, moved to Perth, and we were changing the menu every day of the week in a place called 44 King Street, which is now like the Gucci store, something like that.
Oh, I know what you mean, yeah.
Beautiful. There was a bakery on one side, and, on my breaks I would nick through and just sort of say, "Hey guys, what are you doing? Like, show me what's happening in there." And, then...
Is that King Street Cafe?
Yeah, it was King Street Cafe.
I used to go there all the time.
Matched
Many
wines.
fond memories there.
Are you going across the road from the theatre?
Yes.
It was a busy shop, and it was a great fun. It was a lot of learning. And Bernard McCarthy went on to EQ in Melbourne after that. And, there was some really great chefs who worked there. There was a lot of high pressure, but from my perspective, really enjoying that sort of salad and that freshness, like always bringing in a lot of lemon juice and lime juice and orange and Moroccan flavours and, fresh spices, which was the first place I ever worked where they insisted we bought only whole spices. We roasted them, we ground them, and, when you open that grinder, that smell and that intensity would just hit you in the face, and it was just a pleasure to work with that sort of discipline.
And so do you think that's where you got your passion for the fresh foods and the spices and things like that, or you'd always had it and it was...
Yeah, I think that's always there.
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, my dad had notebooks full of, what he would eat and how it would make him feel and things like this.
Right.
Yeah, so I definitely picked a little bit of that up from my father to this day. Like, my dad eats like no one I've ever met before. Like, his salad plate would be his lunch, and it would be 2 whole spring onions, a carrot, a slice of bread, and a massive chunk of butter. And, that's lunch. But, that's the art of kind of what exactly worked for his body. And, as I get older, I respect that more and more.
It'd be very fascinating reading through his notebooks. Have you read through them a lot, or?
Yeah, not enough. I don't think he held on to many of them at all. But, the ones that we were always focused on was, Dad, what can you eat to, fart less? Because, yes, we, I guess, anyway, my father is, he's very connected. He's very connected to how he's feeling. Like, he's always cycled a minimum of like 150 kilometres a week. He cycled from Kalamunda to Perth every day. When we moved here. So, he's fit, and he knows a lot about himself. He has that feedback loop, which I think a lot of people are kind of losing in the modern age. So I really respect that. And even now, into his 80s, he's still very fit and healthy. Like, if you're walking behind my father and you didn't see, he's only got a few grey hairs, but you just saw the backs of his legs and stuff like that. He looks like a 40-year-old.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I do a lot of running, especially at the moment, and you do notice a lot more about what you're eating, and if you eat the wrong food, you definitely have problems the next day and things like that. So it's very interesting, but it sounds like your father was well ahead of his time, looking at probably back in those early days, people didn't look at what they ate as much and the nutrition side of it and things like that.
Yeah, I think for the most part, he would have stood against diversity for most of his life, being like that, which, was really interesting. And to me, if you ask me as a 17-year-old anything about that, I'd just be like, that's the most boring thing ever, that my dad, verbally speaks about how something that he eats makes him feel. It wasn't something I was into then, that's for sure.
So when you travelled and worked in other restaurants overseas, did you purposely look out for those places and restaurants that had that type of food and the diversity of the food and the fresh food, or not necessarily?
It's a wonderful question. I finished at King Street, and because I had committed, I was working 6 days a week most of the time. So even down in Albany, I was the DJ in the nightclub on the weekends. I worked a 6-day week in a kitchen somewhere. So I was the head chef as a third-year apprentice or a second-year apprentice, catering for weddings at a place called Piermont House back then. So, I really didn't have that much experience, but I just said, I can do it. And I just kept getting more responsibility. So when I got to London, I landed, enjoyed a month of looking around, and then I was offered 5 jobs after doing 5 trials around London. And the position that I took was one where at the day we were catering for Posh Spice and David Beckham, who were the big stars of the day. But it was also interesting. There was 5 chefs catering for a maximum of 40 people. So when, someone that sort of held a lot of weight coming into the restaurant walked in and said they want a spinach soup or a watermelon juice, the only question is, how do we do this? So it was real diversity. It was great.
So that would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then very appropriate, the Spice Girls. Instead of them.
Donna, you're on fire.
Spice Girls got spiced up, yeah.
And did you do any DJing at all, or you just kept your DJing to Albany?
I was working at the Ministry of Sound in London as well. And the guy, Luca, who was managing the place at the time, was always pushing me into the DJ booth. But it was this overwhelmingly, ridiculously extensive booth where they had these sorts of chaos boxes and just bizarrely complicated DJ equipment. And as much as, I would play before my shift and things like that, I think I just got into a point where I was working that much and I actually didn't even sleep between Friday and Sunday afternoon. I was just pushing myself because I liked the Ministry of Sound. I really enjoyed the chefing position, and they put me on breakfast chef and I worked from 10 o'clock at night through till 6 in the morning, started at the restaurant at 6:30 in the morning, went through till, 4 o'clock, had time to, do my washing and stuff like that. And, there was no illicit substances at that point. I think it was
that was my next question.
Yeah, at other points, but not at that point.
But coming back to that, do you think that was, what was that down to? What is it, youth? Is it
sheer motivation?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. You're so far from home. I had this huge rent bill to pay because I really wanted to, enjoy where I lived. I looked over Chiswick Park and shared with an air hostess at the time. It was a good life for me. I guess, I didn't really get that motivated by the party life. I got much more motivated by being just in touch with something different. So when I was working in that restaurant and we would get things in like a fresh white truffle from London and the head chef would tell me, we paid £7,000 for that.
Oh, wow.
It was really interesting. Or the lobsters and the scallops were still alive when they came in the door, and we had special fridges which just held them at the perfect temperature. And, instead of sort of putting a scallop on your board and cutting it up, and this is a bit gruesome, but we would cut it a millimetre thick and you would see the flesh react to the sharp knife. Mm-hmm. It was fresh and it was the best of the best.
Mm. What was the name of this restaurant, Simon?
It was called Blake's. Blake's in South Kensington. At the bottom of the street, they sold Ferraris and McLaren F1 sort of cars and stuff.
This episode is brought to you by Impact Society. Impact Society is a company focused on helping everyday managers become world-changing leaders. They provide straightforward and stylish tools, training and content to elevate leadership skills and mindsets and help leaders thrive both at work and in life. I personally know the company founders, Sean and Joel, and they have set up Impact Society as they saw a gap in the market for leadership training for technically based staff that wasn't as expensive or as lengthy as an MBA or other leadership courses at university. So essentially they've scratched their own itch. They both come from technical backgrounds, and then Joel set up his own consultancy company, and Sean has been in diverse leadership roles in government and the private sector. We are especially excited about Impact Society bringing you this episode because they have a new product, a strategic planning toolkit, which is designed to help leaders put in place a straightforward strategic plan that any organisation or team can follow. As many of us know, strategic planning is not the easiest or most straightforward thing to do. So this toolkit, I've had a good look at it myself. It's completely clear, easy to follow. There's checklists, there's emails, everything you could need to put in place a strategic plan. And for our listeners of the Double D's podcast, there's a 20% discount on this strategic planning toolkit. You just need to go to impactsociety.co, and in the discount code, when you purchase the strategic planning toolkit, you put in the discount code Double D's, so Double DS at the checkout, and then you'll get your 20% discount. So we would encourage anyone, especially people who are new into leadership roles, to check it out.
But Simon, I haven't known you for very long, but even what I do know of you, that does not seem in any way to be what motivates you around that kind of lifestyle. You've already spoken about creativity, about being in touch with, senses and nature and beauty and all those sensory things. And as you describe that scallop, you've got this real sense of, wow.
Yes.
Right?
An explosion of like, wow. Yeah, I had no idea. The seafood in particular at that place would come in every day, still dripping of the ocean. And it was completely different to what I'd seen in Australia. Look, I really I enjoyed that for the experience. Yeah, there was lots of things that I learned there. The head chef was a very interesting guy. The Prince of Greece came in and gave us a glass of wine one night, and this bottle, which the glass had come from, was like, it was ridiculous. It was 17,000 pounds or something like that. And I remember tasting it and just kind of going, it tastes like a sweet, dusty liquid, you know, like it was a vintage of something like 60 years later from when it was grown. But yeah, he was a really nice guy. He gave us all the Kitchen Confidential book one day. And he had a car out the back and a room upstairs. But yeah, I mean, they're just different things. What motivated me about that, I think, was diving into a completely new experience. Yeah.
Because how old were you? Early 20s now or mid-20s or something?
22.
Yeah. So my younger son is 22 and I'm imagining him in that place. I've got one son in London, my eldest son's in London, and he got a little bit involved in the food industry, not from that side. But, you know, here you are 22 and you're starting to get really in touch with these different experiences. What's happening for you in terms of like what's next for me at this stage at 22?
I committed to working there for 8 months. I don't think it was the sort of place where people would stay a long time. As soon as I finished that 8 months, you know, I told the head chef that, and I had a lot of love for the head chef, you know, I think it was a crap wage at the time or whatever, but as soon as I'd finished up there, I was going to France and that's what I was doing. So, you know, off I went, you know,
Why France? Is that because it's the home of all the haute cuisine and all that sort of stuff?
Well, for me personally, it was more like I wanted to see the sunshine. I didn't realise how much of a solar panel I was until I didn't see the sun for something like 3.5 months. Yeah. And in that time, once I laid on a sunbed thing, and I literally felt like I was in heaven. It was bizarre. I had no idea. So, you know, as soon as there was an opportunity to go to the south of France where the sun was shining, I went to a big hotel and took on the head pastry chef position and, you know, did the next 4 months as a contract there, which is their busy time where it's kind of summer sun for the Brits sort of thing and that sort of thing. So, but that wasn't of the same calibre, but it was a very independent position. So everyone worked a 6-day week, and I think that's still the case in France. You know, in Australia, a lot of the people, you know, now we've got 30-plus employees and they're all kind of like, oh, you know, how dare you roster me on 4 or 5 days a week or something like that? Not really, but you know what I mean? Like there's this real expectation, whereas, you know, you travel somewhere like France and it's just the norm that everyone works a 6-day week.
I went to France for a year and went to school there, and even the schools were on Saturday, so everyone went to school 5 days a week, 6 days a week, sorry. Yeah. And did you have training in pastry? Because that's quite a specialised area, isn't it?
I had books, Donna.
Books and a lot of imagination, so a lot of creativity. That's great.
Yeah, no, and I think it was only 3 days there before I tried to burn the place down. I'm not even kidding. Like,
I think we need to hear this story.
Well, 300 people were evacuated onto the front lawn. Like it was on the ocean front, and the whole hotel guest list and everyone was out the front. And what I'd done is I'd left a pot of sugar on a little stove in the corner, which admittedly was kind of faulty, so you couldn't tell if it was on or off. And I'd left it on. And, of course, the whole kitchen was just full of smoke. And the head chef and the sous chef were walking through with this, you know, huge fire hose, and they'd soaked everything in the place to realise that, you know, there was just a cup of sugar that had completely turned to smoke.
You still have a job after
Did you admit that, or did you say, I don't know who's left that on?
Well, it was only me in that kitchen.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah, at that time, I was learning my way. And look, only I would say 7 or 8 weeks later, I was one of the only people taking 2 days off a week, and I would take advantage of the hotel chain, and with my girlfriend at the time, we would jump on a ferry and go to Sardinia, the next island, and, you know, we would be looking around. And even then I remember looking along the coastlines and looking at these amazing plants I'd never seen before, and, you know, tasting them and, you know, being very curious about what's going on. And, you know, it's a completely different environment. The highlight of that for me was leaving the ocean side, which, you know, I might have had a wakeboard in the morning because I was quite friendly with the guys that would organise that for the guests, and heading straight up the mountain behind us. And I could spend a day walking, and I would walk past cork trees and walnut trees and hazelnut trees and be picking all these things. And, you'd never seen any of these things before, but, I kind of recognised them from pictures a lot of the time. And, then I'd walk up this stream, which was the most crystal clear blue water, past these, little bunk beds, which would have been used 2,000 years ago, along these tracks where, it's really, you can see and you can feel that it is a cradle for man and for humans for a really, really long time. It's it's Napoleon's birthplace down there, and it just has so much history. You can ski and surf on the same island in the same day. It's it is absolutely phenomenally beautiful, and you get that real sense of history that is very difficult to find here.
I think also the French are they so much a part of their culture is food and eating and the meals and that kind of thing. They don't.
You just buy a goat's cheese and a slab of salami in France, and your taste buds can go to Mars. Like there's a real honouring of what they can do. There's a respect for the production of food. Yeah,
and a real sort of lots of fresh, different ingredients and things like that. But often very simple dishes too.
Definitely.
Oh, you're making me want to go back to France.
I know, me too. And I'm thinking I've never had a bad bottle of rosé in a French restaurant. Doesn't matter if it's a little cafe or where it is. It's like plonk, a really beautiful pale rosé, the best. Yeah. Oh, we're all like salivating here. So Simon, France, what comes next in the journey?
So 3 months in France. I came back in the middle of, I came back on the first day of December, and I remember, I'd slept for 12 hours after the huge flight, and I woke up to the radio saying it's the first day of summer. So I really timed that nicely. And I just wanted a cruisy job because I'd worked a lot. And I walked into the Norfolk Hotel and I said, can I work behind the bar? And the lady behind the bar didn't receive me well at all. And just because of probably the way I was received, I was kind of like, well, you can take that resume to the kitchen as well if you like. And then, I just jotted down the places that I'd worked, and, sort of the intensity of the places that I had worked obviously resonated with the head chef because I got a phone call within an hour. And then I was running the pizza kitchen there. So I was running the pizza kitchen there for just a couple of months before, a friend rang up, and then he offered me like a chef position on the True North. So the True North is a little boat that still cruises around from Broome to Kununurra, so what used to be the most isolated coastline in the world. So off I went, 4.5 years running my own kitchen for the main part on a little True North, and heading off.
True North's a very luxurious boat, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's amazing. And the highlights for me up there was, you'd get in this big helicopter and you'd literally pull up somewhere that would take you weeks and weeks to walk to. And then it was my job to go and find some sticks, light a fire, put it underneath this little iron, barbecue cooktop, and then grab the barramundi and the mud crabs, which had been pulled out of the rivers the day before, and turn it into an exquisite meal for people who were paying a lot of money to be there. And as soon as it was done, I was gone, and I was looking for Indigenous art on the walls, and, I got very, very hooked on just discovering new things again, getting...
That sense of adventure. How many passengers are on the True North?
That was the original True North, so it was 12 passengers and 28 passengers and 12 crew. Yeah. So up to 14 crew. Often we'd take on a couple of tuckeries, so they weren't paying to be there. They were just doing a bit of work for their board. Half of us would sleep up on the heli deck, which is just a nice flat roof, and you could see the stars often all the way down to the side of the boat when it was a nice calm night.
The Kimberley is such an incredible place. I don't think there's anywhere else like it. It's just, and so remote as well. So a lot of people from Western Australia have never been to the Kimberley, and especially to see it by boat. It must have been just such an incredible opportunity and
amazing. Yeah, really amazing. And I think the owner of the boat really appreciated his food because he always, in the old True North and the new True North, they had big portholes in the kitchen. So you might be in there for 12 hours of the day, but you had a beautiful view. it was quite motivating to pull up at the horizontal falls and, there you are with the front row seat to whatever's happening, and the guys were very considerate. If if I was ahead or who I was working with was pretty onto it, they'd leave me a boat and I would go and look. I probably should apologise to the owner of the boat.
See, this is the risk of coming on a podcast, Simon.
But they would actually leave me a tender and I would just go and look for Indigenous art on walls. Yeah, so
you must have found some extraordinary artwork.
There's a lot of it up there. Yeah.
And how old approximately do you think, what's the estimate of how old that is?
Believe it or not, it's actually quite a political topic because there's these beautiful old arts, which still, I guess, probably most commonly known as like the Bradshaws, which doesn't seem like an appropriate name because it was named by the guy who discovered them in the 1860s and he was an English guy. And they're long and they're tall and they're beautiful figures and they've been set into the rock. There's nothing left on the rock. They can't date it. There's no ochre left. It's like an ice age or something has made it part of the rock. So they can date things no earlier than 15,000 years old, which might be a wasp's nest over the top of the art by dating the pollen in that.
Yeah.
But they can't really date this art. So it's political. I think just because even back then some of the Indigenous people would say it's got nothing to do with us, the birds pecked it into the rocks or whatever. Whereas, now, it's just not a topic that I know anything about. Nothing.
I don't know about you, Donna, but again, as you describe what it was like for you, it's again that all comes back. Well, let me explore, let me be adventurous, let me connect with nature and the food and the environment and just that opportunity.
And you're not the top of the food chain up there. There was a couple of times where, the crocodiles, which would be as long as a tender, would pop up on the side of the boat after I finished taking a wee and basically tell me, I decided not to eat you for whatever reason. So you really got to keep yourself in check.
Yeah. Amazing wild place up there, that's for sure. I used to go to Wyndham a lot for work and crazy
wild country.
Crazy people and wild countryside. Absolutely stunning though.
So Simon, I'm really interested at this point in your story because for a lot of people, they might listen to this story so far and think, you've had this idyllic life and stuff's been handed to you and, but there must have been, I imagine, even in your fairly short life at that time, there must have been a few challenges and a few times, we talk about resilience and courage on this podcast, but where was that starting to show up in terms of things that were? Yeah. Because it does sound pretty dreamy so far.
Well, this is where the normal conversation gets to.
Cool.
It's exactly where the normal conversation gets to because it's all just happy days. To be brutally honest, I think the first real challenge was finishing my apprenticeship. So, there was plenty of days where, I wasn't the fastest in the kitchen, so I would be the last out. Everyone else is sitting outside drinking their third beer and I'm still mopping the kitchen and, I'm still taking care of those things which, I guess that personal level of, it's a personal standard. Like my first head chef used to say to me all the time, he said, it doesn't matter what the rest of the world does. What is your personal standard? And that's what he drilled into me all the time. And obviously, eventually he succeeded. It didn't happen overnight, but it happened. There was so many nights I'd get through the end of that shift and just say, this is exactly how I'm going to tell my boss how to stick his job. Yeah, right squarely up his backside.
Yep.
And that was really, really challenging from someone who, was a bit of a layabout at school to commit hard to 12-hour days to finish the week with like $148 or something like that, which, I was getting paid so little that the government would give me rent allowance or living away from home allowance so that I could pay my rent. So I was never motivated by money. I was always motivated by what was interesting, what was alive in me, to quote NVC.
To quote NVC, I hear that.
That I followed with my nose to the wind. So, that was the only reason I worked in the Ministry of Sound. By the time I left there, I was getting twice as much in tips as I was in my wage. Like they, paid me minimum wage or whatever it was. And, around that, I guess, built skills and, there was definitely some challenging times working through those weekends in London and really challenging not seeing the sunlight. And I had no idea what those challenges were until I found the relief, Yeah, the south of France it was a cloud for a long time. And, in London, for me, it's a party town for most people, but it was the loneliest and coldest time of my life in a lot of ways because, if the sun was up, I was in a dungeon underneath a hotel. And I was working just as hard and fast as I could to impress the chefs around me who were all senior. And, I pushed myself, I think, as hard as I possibly could and then kind of went, well, surely there's a bit more. So I really did do that.
The lifestyle of a chef is very intense, isn't it? Because you do have those very, very long hours and, working at night and on the weekend. So you miss out on a lot of the socialising and things like that, especially when you're younger.
Definitely. Yeah, I missed a lot of friends' birthday parties and all that sort of thing, yeah. And then they eventually stop inviting you. They do because they're like, well, he's just going to be working.
Yeah.
And at the time, though, did the cost, even if you didn't call it the cost at the time, did that feel like it was somehow worth it and you could still push through? Like, obviously you needed the sun at some point and you maybe came home for that.
I went to France for that.
You went to France for that, but you're now back in Australia, kind of that part of your story.
Well, so let's look at that for 2 seconds because I think I'm getting my timelines a little bit messed up. But basically, I do remember when I was in the south of France because the next goal was to go to Canada, down through America overland, and eventually, get to the top of South America and can reconsider things from there. But when I was maybe showing my age now, but when I was in the south of France, they started flying planes into the side of buildings in America, and I could have flown around the world for probably $1,000. It was so cheap to fly because no one wanted to fly anywhere. But, one thing that I had done is I'd done this walking tour of Berlin and they showed how the media had completely controlled the German people's narrative and what they thought and how they responded to what they were being told. So when I was in France, they're flying planes into buildings and all they knew about it was that we don't know what's going on. We don't know who did this. It was a very neutral news. And then my contract finished and I was back in London a week and a bit later and it was all preparing mums and dads to send their babies off to war, basically. And that was the point in which I went, if we're going into some sort of a war, which the English media was telling us, then I wanted to be in Australia. Yeah, that's why at that point I came home. That's, there's no other reason because, I had my sights set on seeing just every continent, getting to Alaska if I could.
Yeah. It's interesting how certain world events like 9/11 do impact on people's lives and their decisions that they make. This episode is brought to you by my coaching program about navigating a life quake. If you've experienced a life quake, which is a traumatic life event that you are struggling to cope with, then this 9-week coaching program is for you. This is based on a very traumatic workplace-related incident that I had in November 2021 where I was absolutely struggling to cope. Over the months that followed, I documented everything I did to recover and I've incorporated it into a framework, which is the Stronger Framework. So the program is Navigating a Life Quake and it's amongst a supportive community, a transformational 9-week coaching program which includes weekly virtual coaching sessions and lots of other materials. So if you are interested and you can relate to this, for listeners of the Double D's podcast, there's a 20% discount. Go to my personal website, www.donnasbalconyviews.com.au. You can find out more information about this transformational coaching program. And if you put in double D, so double DS as one word, you can get a 20% discount on the 9-week coaching program. So what was the period between the True North and setting up More and More?
That's a good question. Okay, so I finished on the True North. I've been paid okay, and if I'd asked for a pay rise, I know they would have given me one in hindsight, but again, I was never motivated by money. But when I came back down, I had an opportunity and I bought a tiny little apartment in Scarborough. So my focus then was to turn this little apartment into something quite beautiful. and, you know, bringing back those woodwork skills and, you know, took a wall out of the middle of this apartment with my now brother-in-law and, you know, just created a lot, you know, saw this little apartment turn from something which was pretty, you know, average to something rather sensational with another friend's help from Queensland as well, actually, just in case he listens to the podcast. Dylan, I love you. I haven't seen you for a while, but you're a legend. And, you know, that little apartment kept me busy for a while. And then, you know, I was just working in what was the Benyon Street food store at the time, and I liked that they made all their own fresh juices to order and stuff like this. And again, I took the larder section, you know. I was like, do you want to do the grill? And I was like, not really. And then, yeah, as soon as that was all settled, I went up to Broome. What was happening after that? So, yeah, I think I got into property. I thought maybe time to start taking life a little bit seriously, which was good. And, that Benyon Street was where I met my business partner for the first year of More and More. Mm-hmm. And he was very good on the floor. He was really into his coffee. You could talk to him for hours about coffee, which was great because, you know, as far as I could tell, I really enjoyed coffee, but I generally would have a strong coffee and then get a headache. So it was something which, you know, I erred on the side of caution. So a half-strength coffee is kind of my jam, embarrassingly.
Yeah, I don't like coffee that's too strong either. What was the transition like from being a chef to owning your own business? Did you find that?
Well, that took a long time. So first year of More and More, I was as much maintenance as I was chef. You know, we started with 4 staff and, you know, at the end of the second week, my business partner at the time and myself just looked at each other and we were like, it's working. We didn't know if this was going to happen, but it's working, you know, and we seemed to get a really good reputation really quickly. We were on the back streets of Fremantle, so people didn't come into Fremantle for the gravity of Fremantle. They came to us to have an experience. You know, it's still one of the oldest buildings in use in Western Australia as far as I know. You know, it's proper 3/4 of a metre limestone sort of convict-looking built building, which is gallery for the main part, cafe in the open and sort of public areas because there's art studios out the back, you know, like old school Fremantle, which was all about art studios and little spaces and tucked away nooks. You know, you really get that feel when you come into More and More. So a lot of it was just doing everything we could to make that space work for the public. You know, there was a rosemary bush out the back, which I broke 2 hose on. You know, this thing had a trunk on it like a tree, and it was an amazing thing. But, you know, just doing whatever we could to create a space which was approachable, comfortable, and, you know, that was one piece at a time. Yeah, so it was, I would say, some 90-hour weeks through to, you know, 70-hour weeks, but, you know, it was always up there. You know, we might be shopping for a stainless steel fridge that we could get and repaint all the paintable bits and, you know, turn it into something which the health inspector would look at and go, that's okay.
It sounds like you saw it as a big adventure as well, another exciting new thing, and you were used to the long hours from your other work.
Yeah. And every time a customer comes through the door and there's that capacity, that's an adventure now. You know, there's that's always been a huge driver is community. I've always loved people and I still do, you know, hurt by people at times. But I think, you know, people have so much life. They have so many stories. They have so much to connect to when you find the time and the ability to comprehend where they're coming from and just really find those common threads. You know, it's amazing. I love that. That still motivates me every day.
Do you think that's part of the what food and coming together over food allows? Is that storytelling?
Breaking bread.
Hey?
Breaking bread together.
Yeah, they're breaking bread together, yeah.
Well, it's one of the few times where people have no other agenda. They sit and they connect. And, I'm not overly religious. I do believe that there's something much greater than myself in the world. And, there is a lot of things much greater than myself to believe in. But, when it comes to everyday practicality of creating connection, creating that appreciation of the space between two individuals and how they can connect and all those wonderful things that spin from that and are in that make life worthwhile. That's what motivates me every day. And that's, to me, the reason why I don't have 5 cafes. Over the years I've had invitations to take on some amazing spaces. But, would I potentially lose the reason why I'm so happy to be in the industry now? Possibly.
I have on the toilet door of More and More today, I saw one of you do have a lot of culinary experience nights, and I think that's a real passion of yours because there's
I thought you were going somewhere else with that, Donna, on the back of the toilet door.
I'm famous for toilet stories, but it did look very interesting and a lot of locally sourced food. How can you tell us more about those nights and the philosophy behind it?
Sure. So we've done 6 vegan, organic and slightly shamanic dinners. They've been once a month. I'm actually away next month. We're going to Japan. We're going to our second blue zone, which is fantastic. Very excited and inspired by that. But so the vegan, organic and slightly shamanic is the sort of dinner that we like to do. We used to do a lot of farm-to-table dinners and work directly in with farmers. And a shout-out if any farmers would like to champion their product and do a farm-to-table with us directly, then I'm very, very excited and open to that. That's been a lot of fun in the past, meeting the guys that work, similar sorts of hours to myself on farms to, really bring produce that they believe in. And, those are the same ones that are going to stand up in front of 100 people and say, this is what we produce and this is why we believe in it and this is why we do it. Then they're the absolute rock stars of my world because a chef is a chef and we can produce food as long as there's food. But, when you take things out of the industrial food system and you get back to the complexities of flavour, like today I stopped in a shop and I took 10 minutes out of my day just to get some organic tomatoes and I'm so glad that I did because the amount of flavour that I was punched with when I ate them with my dinner tonight was just phenomenal. You can't beat that. I can't even make this stuff up, but last time we were in Margaret River, there's this hand-raised kangaroo and the lady we were staying with gave us some carrots from, a bog standard carrot supply. They looked perfect and the kangaroo wasn't interested, but in the bottom of our car was an organic carrot that had rolled around. It was black, it was horrible, and I was just interested. What is the kangaroo going to think of this organic carrot? It looks horrible. Took one sniff, grabbed it with its front paws and ate the whole thing. These black spots and rolled and mashed organic carrot over this perfect looking, kind of bag of whatever. I want to say Coles carrots, but I probably can't.
So Simon, that's such a powerful image. What does that tell you about what you already know?
Yeah. Well, to me, we export a lot of carrots from Western Australia, like ridiculous tons of carrots from Western Australia. But the only ones that I choose to serve in More and More are the organic ones, because I guess I've spent so much of my life training my taste buds that if I bite into a carrot, which is, that 99 cents per kilo carrot, there's no substance there. Like I'm not enjoying the experience. Whereas, if we're able to find something which someone has grown with a lot of love and care, and I visited some of the organic farms which produce this produce and it's small scale, it's got these little fences which they're constantly maintaining to keep the kangaroos out of them and this sort of thing, you've really got something which is incredible. And we can go down the whole track of what's happening to human fertility right now. In Perth, there's a lot of people doing IVF. And I just think back to, all right, well, what's the nutrient matrix in what it is that you're choosing to consume? And how does that reflect in your body's ability to create the magic to see the human species continue?
Do you find that there are more places with organic foods and these small scale, or do you think that that's a risk of losing that?
I can't answer that. I do like to think there's more interest. I'd like to think that there's more people, and maybe it's happened in the last sort of 3 years, there's a lot of people kind of potentially giving attention to, exactly what it is that is going on in the modern food system. So, for example, I could run through 20 that we choose in more and more. I'll just do kind of what we focus on, the dense calories. So the beef is all coming from somewhere which is hormone-free. It's non-grain fed, so there's no GMOs in there. It's grass-fed and finished, which means and finished is the big one because we've got so much land here that all cattle is grass-fed. It's grass-finished, which is very rare because when they chuck them on grain for the last 2 weeks of their life or whatever, they get a lot more weight out of that beast. And at that point, you throw out the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. I guess it's probably like feeding a child candy for a solid 2 weeks and going, all right, well, what's the composition of this being? Is it healthy? Is it not healthy? And that is reflected on, the down the chain sort of situation. But yeah, I feel like we're a little bit off track, but
well, it kind of, I think, it speaks about, that thread that's run through right from childhood, really, in the modelling about how important it is that we pay attention to what we put into our bodies. And some of the other things I'm hearing that I'm really curious about is there must be a pull as a business owner to say, well, surely we're thinking about the bottom line, all the time. Yeah. And the challenge of that, because surely you're paying 2, 3, 4 times as much for your ingredients. Often.
Absolutely. Yeah. So olive oil is another dense calorie. So, we get WA first pressed olive oil for 90% of the oil that we use. Now, there's some scenarios in which that oil is too peppery and too pungent. So in that situation, and I put this out to anyone listening, at the moment we're using, to back that up, we're paying for a rice bran oil. So as far as I can tell, I've written to the supplier and I've found out, as far as they will tell me and they will assure me that there's no GMO produce going into that and stuff, but they will not tell me what the extractant is, because obviously to get oil out of something as dry as a piece of rice bran, it's going to take some sort of clever trickery. But what is that? Is that something that's carcinogenic? Is that something that's heat sensitive? I'm still looking to answer that question, and it's not easy. I have a certain amount of time and I will commit myself to getting those sorts of answers. But, that's one which at the moment I think we could do better. But I'm happy with where most of our oil comes from. I'm happy with most of our fish, where that comes from. Could we do better? Yes, I think we could do better. Am I doing the best we can at this point in time? Am I open to people coming in and saying, oh, you're already using that. What about this? And, I love comparing things and finding, what it is, because it's such a privilege to me to feed people. And then if we can feed people in such a way that really nourishes them, that's next level, So 99% of the time we're buying in whole ingredients. We're processing it ourselves. We're even looking for the butter, which is grass-fed and finished. We're looking for that to be able to deliver what we believe is delivering the best produce and the best, result, so that when you trust us to nourish you, we're doing our best job.
And I think it's a good reminder for everybody to think more about what we're putting in our bodies. Yeah. I know everyone, I should be thinking more about it. So
a big component I only worked out recently is, I think, in just even 100 years ago, there's no chance we could have cooked the amount of food that we eat now. And there's this huge thing about the microbiome, which is supposed to be, I think most people, especially when I was young, I was just like, this is a magic machine. I just chuck stuff in and it just, pulls all the goodness out. But in reality, if you are not eating a good portion of raw, ideally organic things, then those living nutrients, which exist like in an apple, like the birchie you said you had this morning before the podcast, that has enough enzymes in it to digest itself. Mm. And your body just absorbs the nutrients and it's just there and it's available and it's amazing. But if you're not eating anything raw, if you're not eating anything to help your digestion, then it makes sense that we're in this situation backing ourselves into a corner where we've got to, spend probably billions of dollars working out the perfect probiotic to try and make up for that, rather than just kind of going, okay, what's the most nutritious, like at the moment, wild garlic is everywhere. My friends live up in the hills and they're like, Simon, come and get yourself 20 kilos of 3-cornered garlic. Now, farmers are spraying that everywhere. But when we were travelling through Bulgaria, going to organic farms after organic farms, They loved that stuff because they brought it up, they dried it out at 40 degrees and they ground it and they mixed it with salt. And they had that for the whole year. And they know that it's such a nutrient-dense food that even in the middle of winter when everything's covered in snow, they can top their meal with that. They can finish it. They know that they don't heat that. That goes in after the temperature comes down and they keep the nutrient density. There's so many of this, I guess it's innate wisdom that in a lot of countries is still really prominent, whereas here it's time to start learning it again.
And Simon, where have those opportunities or have those opportunities for you to be an educator in that space? I mean, you obviously do it through more and more because of how you run your business. But has anyone come knocking for like a TV series about this and how you run this?
No, the short answer is no. Yeah, I do love doing what we do.
Well, I'm just going to put it out there that I think, I'm just seeing, a whole TV series around this and the education that connects us back. I'm just going to put it out there and see what happens.
Cheers.
We are absolutely thrilled that you've come on the show, but you came not just by yourself. You came carrying these amazing products. So I'm going to open it. I'm just going to let our listeners hear you describe what it is that you've brought us and tell us a bit about it.
Absolutely, yeah. So this has been a real pleasure, and all of the credit really goes to my wife, who's done a fantastic job. What I've brought you is it's a chai sticky chai date cake. So there's no refined sugars in there. There's no gluten in there, which is important for you at the moment, Diane.
Very important for me because I've just found out I'm celiac. So this is amazing to have something to eat.
And it's totally vegan as well. So it's really it's a good one. It's taken a lot of research to get to a point where we're happy, like the mouthfeel, the flavours, everything's there. We've, in this particular cake, a lot of the sweetness comes from those dates and, there's always secret ingredients, but they're coming from whole foods. There's not really anything in there that I wouldn't feed, and we feed our 3-year-old and our 6-year-old these cakes, there's no problem at all. On the flip side in there, what have you got? You got the paleo baklava, so that's organic nuts and seeds, and then you've got a little bit of coconut oil and some honey, which is straight from Margaret River. Now, we started making that 6-ish years ago, so now I wouldn't really cook the honey like I have in that, but it is still an amazing food, and the depth of flavour you get from the beautiful.
Oh my God, listeners, I can't even begin to describe it. It is absolutely full of flavour. Amazing.
Enjoying that. And the other thing in there is 100% organic. It's Brazil nuts, which are from Brazil, and when you get the Brazil nuts from Brazil, they're all wild. So they're all foraged. There is no plantations. So Brazil nuts from Brazil are full of selenium. Selenium is massive for heart health. Especially this is something that's happening in New Zealand a lot, is babies getting born with holes in their hearts because mum had a deficiency of selenium. There's a massive deficiency in selenium in the soil. And over there they're quite good at, supplementing a sheep's diet because they know this. But they're not very good at supplementing human diets. So it's very strange. But anyway, so that's in the Blueberry Blondie. That's one large component of it. It's got almond meal in it. That one actually has eggs in it. We love our egg supplier. If you'd like to meet our egg supplier, on our Instagram, there's a video of us visiting the farm. And, what they're doing out there is just fantastic. They bought this old farm and they've planted all these nature corridors. And when I pulled up out there, there was this fox running across the gate. And I was like, surely they'd be worried about foxes, And the reality is they're not. They've got 2 llamas that look after each of the flocks of birds. They've got just enough birds that they can look after. They don't want to do more. They've got electric fences around them, and they're fed 100% non-GMO, 100% good food, and they're moving them daily. Like when I visited other chicken farms, they're like, I'll maybe move them next week. Or in reality, maybe they're moving them once a month. They're moving these chickens daily, and they're getting, fresh pasture every day. And when summer comes around and there's nothing fresh, they go over to the lettuce suppliers and they literally, I kid you not, I can't even make this up. They go over to the lettuce suppliers and they say to them, look, what have you got that you didn't sell? And they take everything that they didn't sell, they feed it to the chickens. So the chickens are always getting, really vibrant, fresh greens.
Well, I think our listeners will be very, very hungry by now, so I would encourage them to eat something wholesome and healthy. Are there any final items you'd like to mention to our listeners, Simon? It's been fascinating hearing about your career and
thank you. Yeah, thank you. It's been a real pleasure. I guess the one thing I would say after visiting Ikaria, which is a blue zone in Greece, which we absolutely loved, is, it doesn't really seem like there's a shortcut to really good food. When we were there, we were really blown away by the depth of flavour, but also 9 times out of 10 without any problem at all, you would know what was in season because you'd walk into the local supermarket and the farmers just come down the hill and dropped off 20 kilos of apricots. As soon as you walk in the front door of that supermarket, all you can smell is apricots. Or, when you go to a restaurant and you order a chicken and the restaurant owner has the farm down the road and, they dropped off the chickens only 2 hours before and you've just got the most, for me it's a strange looking bird because it's not very meaty, but the most flavour density I've ever tasted in anything. So, it's a reality that there's not really, as far as I know, there's not really shortcuts to getting that sort of nutrient density in food, which is definitely a passion.
Is it Okinawa? How do you say it? Okinawa?
Okinawa's next.
Yeah, the other blue zone in Japan, because I've seen a lot of shows about there as well, and they spend so much time gardening, growing their own vegetables and making, they collectively make a lot of healthy dishes.
We do a bit of that at home for sure.
So that's going to be
we were there in August.
Fantastic.
Yeah, very excited.
Well, Simon, it's been absolutely fantastic having you join us, and we could go in so many threads in your very interesting career, but your passion is undeniable. And if people want to get in touch with you, how do they find you apart from physically at More and More?
Well, look, through the, I guess, More and More, the website, More and More Cafe, Fremantle. We are on social media. We're not that good at monitoring it, so I was glad I saw your message come through actually. But look, if you're okay to wait for a week for a response, you can use the social media. Otherwise, head to the website and send us an email. Yeah.
And for anyone visiting Fremantle, go into the cafe and have some of this beautiful home cooked and very lovingly prepared food. Thank you very much, Simon. I've greatly enjoyed our discussion.
Thank you, Donna. It's been a pleasure.
We hope you've loved today's episode. We always enjoy bringing these to you. We'd love to grow the podcast, and one of the ways that we can do that is to ask you to like us, to follow us, to give us a review, but also just to share it with your friends and family. Oh my goodness, Simon has just left, but when he walked in tonight with these cakes, they honestly, as soon as I took the lid off, the smell is just so aromatic, and now I'm sitting here munching my way through them, and I'm supposed to be being really good, Donna.
Well, from what Simon says, they're very healthy cakes anyway, but I had a bircher muesli at More and More today. It's about the healthiest bircher muesli I've ever seen. There were so many different grains and seeds and fruit in there, and it is true. I've felt so healthy all day, and when you eat something not so healthy, you really do feel it that night or the next morning. So yeah,
I've just had an idea. You've just said Simon Says. I think Simon Says should be the name of his TV show.
Yeah, very good.